A black person in my chair not too long ago called me the N-word. More specifically, he called me his N-word. You my N-word. It's never happened to me before. Never had a black person, definitely not at work, for sure. I don't think any time in my entire life has that ever happened. At the same time,
10,000 balloons. That's what it allegedly took for Offset to realize what he lost. But here's the part nobody expected. Cardi B didn't cry. She didn't smile. She didn't soften. She reportedly said, "I don't want anything from you." And just like that, the grand gesture that was supposed to melt her heart turned into the most awkward public rejection of the year. Because imagine this. You wake up to a room filled wall to wall with balloons, custom colors, luxury delivery, cameras outside, social media already buzzing, everyone assuming this is the beginning of a fairy tale reconciliation. But instead of running into his arms, she steps back, cold, unmoved, unimpressed, and allegedly makes it clear no gifts, no drama, no nostalgia will bring her back. Now here's where it gets interesting. Sources claim Offset thought the spectacle would reset everything, that the sheer scale of it, 10,000 balloons, flowers, messages, would overpower whatever distance had grown between them. But what happens when the person you're trying to win back isn't impressed by effort anymore? Because the trust is gone. That's when things shift from romantic to desperate. And insiders are saying the energy behind this gesture wasn't calm. It was urgent. Because when someone sends 10,000 balloons, they're not just saying, "I miss you," they're saying, "I'm losing control of this." And the fact that Cardi reportedly responded with nothing but emotional distance, that's what made this moment explosive. So now the internet is asking one question. Was this love? Or was this panic? Let's break down what allegedly happened. Because on the surface, 10,000 balloons sounds romantic, cinematic, the kind of thing that trends for the right reasons. But context changes everything. According to circulating reports and social media chatter, Offset arranged an over-the-top display, thousands of balloons filling a space, luxury floral arrangements, possibly even a message attached, the kind of public spectacle that screams effort. But here's the thing about grand gestures. They only work when the foundation is still intact. If the emotional bond is strong, a dramatic apology feels powerful. If the trust is broken, that same gesture feels performative. And insiders are saying Cardi wasn't impressed. She wasn't angry. She wasn't screaming. She was distant. That's worse. Because anger still carries attachment. Distance carries finality. When someone says, "Oh, I don't want anything from you," that isn't just rejecting a gift. It's rejecting obligation. It's rejecting nostalgia. It's rejecting the emotional leverage behind the gesture. Now think about the timing. If this happened after tension, public fallout, or emotional exhaustion, then the balloon display wasn't about romance, it was about reversal. Offset allegedly wanted to flip the narrative. He wanted spectacle. He wanted headlines like, "Offset wins Cardi back." But instead, he allegedly got silence. And silence in response to a dramatic apology is psychologically brutal. Because grand gestures are high-risk moves. They create public expectations. They put pressure on the other person to respond emotionally. And if they don't, the person who made the gesture looks exposed. Now let's talk psychology. Why do people escalate to extreme romantic displays? Usually because smaller attempts didn't work. Texts ignored, calls unanswered, conversations avoided. When subtle reconciliation fails, people amplify. They go bigger, louder, more public. It's not always manipulation. Sometimes it's desperation. But desperation doesn't guarantee forgiveness. In fact, it often confirms the imbalance. And what makes this situation interesting is Cardi's alleged reaction. "I don't want anything from you." That sentence signals something specific. Emotional detachment. It's not, "I need time." It's not, "We'll talk." It's not, "Let's fix this." It's a boundary, a clean one. And boundaries are terrifying to someone who believes effort should equal access. Because effort doesn't erase history. Effort doesn't erase repeated issues. The effort doesn't rebuild trust overnight. If anything, effort without accountability can feel hollow. Now, from a public image standpoint, this moment shifts perception. Offset looks like the man trying to repair something. Cardi looks like the woman who has emotionally moved on. And whether that's fully accurate or not doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality online. Social media reactions were split. Some people called the balloon move romantic. Others called it performative. Some praised Cardi for standing firm. Others questioned whether this was just another chapter in a dramatic relationship cycle. But one thing was consistent. People noticed her lack of emotional response. And that's what made it powerful. Because sometimes the strongest statement isn't a speech, it's composure. Now, here's the part nobody talks about. Grand gestures aren't just about love. They're about visibility. If this happened in private, it's one thing. But when something becomes public knowledge, it changes the dynamic. Public reconciliation attempts create public pressure. And Cardi refusing that pressure? That shifts power. Because now the question becomes, was this truly about winning her back, or about restoring ego? When someone sends 10,000 balloons, they want a reaction, even if it's anger, even if it's tears. But indifference stings. And sources suggest that indifference is exactly what Offset received. No dramatic Instagram story, no teary caption, no hint of reconciliation, just distance. Now imagine being the one who made the grand move. You invest money, energy, planning, emotion, and the person you're trying to reach doesn't even engage. That's humbling, and humiliation can either trigger growth or trigger escalation. Which brings us to the real tension. What happens when a grand gesture fails? Does the person step back gracefully? Or do they try again, bigger? Because here's the truth. If someone truly says, "I don't want anything from you," and means it, there's no balloon count high enough to change that. And that's where this story gets interesting. Because rejection after effort often reveals the real emotional balance between two people. One trying to restore connection, one already detached. And right now, it looks like Cardi is detached. But we haven't seen the next move yet. That sentence is colder than people realize. I don't want anything from you. Not money, not flowers, not balloons, not apologies, nothing. When someone reaches that emotional point, it usually means they've already grieved the relationship privately. And that's the part the public never sees. Because while people online focus on the 10,000 balloons, the real story is what happened before that moment. You don't reject a grand gesture unless something deeper broke. Let's analyze this carefully. Grand romantic displays are designed to trigger nostalgia. They remind you of the beginning, the good times, the chemistry, the bond. They try to override logic with emotion. So, when Cardi reportedly responded with distance instead of softness, it suggests something powerful. Nostalgia no longer works on her. And that's dangerous territory for someone trying to win you back. Because if emotional memory no longer controls you, manipulation loses power too. Now let's talk about the optics. Offset sending 10,000 balloons makes him look like the one fighting for love. Cardi refusing makes her look strong. But strength in breakups isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. And quiet strength is the hardest to shake. If she truly said she wants nothing from him, that tells us something specific. She doesn't want access. She doesn't want leverage. She doesn't want attachment. And when someone no longer wants attachment, the relationship is spiritually over. Even if the paperwork isn't. Now here's where things get layered. Public relationships come with ego dynamics, especially when both individuals are powerful, wealthy, and highly visible. When one person makes a massive gesture and the other rejects it. It's not just romantic rejection, it's reputational rejection. It tells the world, you can't buy your way back in. And that message is loud, because in celebrity culture, money often smooths conflict. Luxury gestures are expected, but refusing them disrupts that expectation. And the internet noticed. People started debating, is this real detachment? Or is it a power move? Is Cardi protecting her peace? Or is this another chapter in an emotional cycle? That uncertainty fuels attention. But what stands out most is the psychological shift. Offset reportedly went big. Cardi reportedly went still. Stillness wins long term. Because chaos burns out. Stillness endures. Now let's examine something deeper. Why do people send extreme romantic gestures after breakups? Usually it's triggered by fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of replacement. Fear of finality. When someone senses permanent separation, they escalate emotionally. They think, if I show her how much I care publicly, she'll remember. But here's the flaw. Public care doesn't fix private damage. And if trust was fractured repeatedly, no balloon count changes that. Trust rebuilds through consistency, not spectacle. Now imagine being Cardi in this scenario. You've heard promises before, you've seen effort before, you've watched cycles repeat before. At some point you stop responding to intensity, you respond to peace. And if she's prioritizing peace, then the balloons feel like noise, not love, noise. And here's the most important detail. She didn't mock it. She didn't drag him online. She didn't expose anything. She just declined. That's maturity. Because when someone is done, they don't argue. They disengage. Now let's consider Offset's side. If he genuinely wanted reconciliation, this was likely a last-ditch emotional move, a dramatic reset attempt. But dramatic resets only work when both people want to reset. If one person is already emotionally checked out, it becomes one-sided. And one-sided effort feels humiliating. That's when ego enters the room. And ego changes behavior. Because rejection after effort can lead to two outcomes: self-reflection or resentment. We don't know which direction this will go yet, but the tension is building. Now socially, this moment shifts the narrative. Cardi looks composed. Offset looks reactive. That doesn't make him wrong. But it changes perception. And perception is currency in celebrity culture. Brands notice. Fans notice. Media notices. When one person appears unbothered and the other appears intense, the balance tilts. And balance matters in public relationships. Now here's the deeper question nobody is asking. What if the balloons weren't just about love? What if they were about reassurance? Sometimes people send big gestures not because they're losing someone, but because they're losing influence over someone. And influence in relationships can feel like security. If Cardi is truly operating independently now, making decisions without emotional pressure, that changes everything. Because autonomy is power. And power shifts are uncomfortable. So when she allegedly said, "I don't want anything from you," she may have been signaling something larger. "I don't need you." That sentence hits harder than rejection. Because needing someone keeps emotional doors open, not needing them closes doors. Now the internet waits. Will Offset respond again? Will he escalate? Will he retreat? Will Cardi address it publicly? Or will silence continue? Right now, the silence is louder than the balloons ever were, and silence, when intentional, speaks volumes. Now we're entering the part people don't want to admit. This is no longer just romance, it's power. Because in high-profile relationships, especially ones that have already been through public storms, every move becomes strategic whether you intend it to or not. Offset's alleged 10,000 balloon gesture wasn't just emotional, it was symbolic. It said, "I'm still here. I still have access. I can still make grand moves." But Cardi's reported response, calm, detached, uninterested, symbolized something stronger. You don't have influence over me anymore. That's a dangerous shift. When someone loses influence in a relationship, they often don't know how to react. Especially if they're used to being the one pursued, admired, forgiven, or given second chances. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Grand gestures often work when there's imbalance, when one person still hopes, when one person still waits, when one person still emotionally leans. But when both people are standing independently, the gesture loses its leverage, and that's what makes this moment different. Now let's zoom out. Why does this situation feel heavier than past breakups between them? Because the tone is different. Before, the drama felt loud, emotional, reactive. This time it feels measured, quiet, controlled. Cardi isn't ranting. She isn't subtweeting. She isn't posting heartbreak captions. She's just living. And that's unsettling for someone expecting chaos. Because chaos means emotional attachment still exists. And calm means acceptance. And acceptance is final. Now let's talk about ego. Ego doesn't like being rejected publicly, especially not after spending money, effort, and time planning something dramatic. Imagine setting up 10,000 balloons, expecting tears, hugs, maybe even reconciliation photos, and instead receiving a boundary. That stings. But what stings more is the internet watching it happen. Because once the story spreads, it stops being private. Now it becomes a narrative. And narratives can't be controlled once they leave your hands. Offset likely didn't anticipate that the gesture would be interpreted as desperation by some audiences. He probably thought it would look romantic, and to some people it did. But to others, it looked like someone trying to fix damage with display instead of accountability. Now, here's where it gets psychologically interesting. When someone says, "I don't want anything from you," they're not just rejecting a gift. They're rejecting emotional debt. Because gifts create subconscious obligation. They create emotional pressure. They say, "Look how much I'm trying." And if the other person responds warmly, the slate feels cleaner. But Cardi refusing that slate reset means something deeper. She doesn't want the cycle to continue. And that's what makes this story heavy. Because cycles are hard to break, especially when history is long. Now think about this carefully. If Cardi truly wanted reconciliation, this would have been the perfect cinematic moment. Soft lighting, luxury visuals, redemption narrative. Instead, she reportedly shut it down. That tells me something about her internal clarity. You don't reject comfort unless you've already processed the pain. And processing pain quietly is a powerful thing. It means she likely detached emotionally before the gesture even happened. And when someone is already detached, the biggest move in the world won't pull them back. Now here's the bigger question. Is this the final chapter? Or just another pause? Because historically, high-profile relationships often go through phases of separation and reunion. But something feels different this time. The energy isn't chaotic, it's resolved. And resolution doesn't create headlines, it ends them. Which brings us to Offset's next move. If he truly wants her back, escalation would be risky. Bigger gestures could start looking performative. More public attempts could start looking pressured. And pressure rarely rebuilds trust. The smarter move would be quiet consistency, but quiet consistency doesn't trend. And celebrity culture thrives on trending moments. So the tension builds. Will he adapt? Or will he try again louder? Because sometimes when someone loses emotional access, they double down instead of stepping back. And doubling down after rejection can damage perception fast. Now let's talk about public perception for a second. Fans are watching this closely. Some are rooting for reconciliation. Some are rooting for independence. Some are analyzing every micro-expression. But the overwhelming tone right now, Cardi looks in control. And control shifts power. Because when you're the one who doesn't react emotionally, you dictate the pace. Offset made a move. Cardi didn't. That silence shifts narrative authority to her. And that's why this moment feels significant. Now let's get honest. If this story stopped here, it would already be dramatic. But it won't. Because in high-profile relationships, silence is rarely permanent. Eventually someone speaks. Eventually someone posts. Eventually someone reacts. The question is, will the next move come from pride or growth? Because this moment is a fork in the road. One direction leads to maturity and distance. The other leads to ego battles and escalation. And right now, we're sitting right at that intersection. Here's what nobody is talking about enough. The most powerful move in this entire situation wasn't the balloons. It was the silence that followed. Because after the alleged 10,000 balloon apology, after the romantic spectacle, after the headlines started circulating, Cardi didn't spiral. She didn't clap back. She didn't post a cryptic message. She didn't shade. She didn't respond emotionally at all. And that's what changed the temperature of the story. See, when drama happens in public relationships, we expect chaos. We expect back and forth energy. We expect tweets, live sessions, screenshots, subliminals. But what we got instead? Stillness. And stillness is unsettling, because silence forces people to project their own interpretations. Some fans saw strength. Some saw indifference. Some saw closure. But what everyone saw was control. Now think about this carefully. When someone sends 10,000 balloons, they're creating a moment designed to spark a reaction. Emotion, tears, forgiveness, conversation. When there's no reaction, the moment loses oxygen. And without oxygen, even the biggest spectacle fades fast. That's exactly what happened here. The conversation shifted from, "Wow, that's romantic," to, "Wait." She didn't respond. And in that shift, the power dynamic quietly flipped. Because attention is currency in celebrity relationships, Offset made a move that demanded attention. Cardi responded by not feeding it. That's strategic, whether intentional or not. Now here's where things start getting layered. Sources say Cardi has been focused heavily on her career, her performances, her business moves, and her children. Not breakup commentary, not relationship narratives, just forward motion. Forward motion sends a message. It says, "I'm not stuck in this. I'm not negotiating emotionally. I'm not entertaining cycles." And that's not dramatic. That's final. But here's the twist. Silence can be misread. Offset might interpret it as coldness. Fans might interpret it as strength. Critics might interpret it as PR control. But at its core, silence usually means one thing: clarity. You don't stay quiet unless you're sure. Now let's talk about ego again. Ego doesn't just struggle with rejection. It struggles with irrelevance. And silence can make someone feel irrelevant fast. Because if you pour emotion into a gesture and get nothing back, you start questioning your impact. Did it matter? Did it land? Did it move her at all? And when the answer appears to be no, that hits harder than a public argument. Arguments mean energy still exists. Silence suggests energy has ended. That's heavy. Now zoom out and look at the optics. Offset, big romantic gesture. Cardi, composed, unaffected, focused. The internet loves contrast. And contrast creates narrative. Right now, the narrative feels like he's trying, she's done. Whether that's fully accurate or not doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality online. And perception right now leans heavily in her favor. But here's something deeper. Sometimes when someone refuses a gesture, it's not because they don't care. It's because they care too much to repeat the cycle. History between them isn't light. It's layered. It's emotional. It's public. And public relationships carry extra weight because reconciliation isn't just personal. It becomes performance. If Cardi accepted the balloons, the internet would expect a reunion announcement. If she smiled publicly, speculation would explode. Silence avoids all of that. Silence protects boundaries. And boundaries in celebrity culture are rare. Now here's the part nobody wants to say. Offset may have believed the grand gesture would reset everything. Because historically, dramatic moments sometimes lead to reconciliation stories. but timing matters. If someone has emotionally moved on before the gesture happens, it won't work. And based on the energy surrounding this situation, it feels like Cardi had already emotionally stepped away. You don't say, "I don't want anything from you," unless you've already done the internal work. That line doesn't come from anger. It comes from acceptance. Now, imagine being on the other side of that. Imagine thinking there's still hope. Imagine thinking a romantic display could reignite connection. And then being met with a wall of calm detachment. That's not just rejection. That's realization. Realization that the chapter might actually be closed. And realization hits differently than argument. Now, here's the tension building under the surface. If Offset stays silent too, this fades into quiet separation. If he reacts again, bigger, louder, emotional, the story escalates. And escalation after silence can start looking unbalanced, which is why this moment matters. We're watching the crossroads. Will he pivot, or will he push harder? Because pushing harder when someone has clearly stepped back doesn't bring them closer. It widens the gap, and right now, the gap feels wider than ever. But here's the thing about celebrity narratives. They rarely end cleanly. There's usually one more twist, one more move, one more moment that shifts perception again. And if that twist comes, it could either reopen everything or seal it permanently. Here's where the situation gets even more intense, because this isn't just about love anymore, it's about image. And in celebrity culture, image is everything. When Offset allegedly sent those 10,000 balloons, some people saw romance, but others saw something else. They saw a man trying to control the narrative. Think about the timing. The breakup had already sparked conversation. Speculation was spreading. People were picking sides. Then suddenly, boom. A massive public gesture. That kind of move doesn't just say, "I miss you." It says, "Look at me trying." And that matters. Because public perception can rewrite history. If the story becomes, Offset fought for her, instead of Offset lost her, that changes how the internet frames the breakup. But here's the problem. Cardi didn't participate in that rewrite. She didn't repost it. She didn't acknowledge it. She didn't give the moment oxygen. And when only one side is performing reconciliation, it starts looking one-sided fast. Now let's break down what's really happening beneath the surface. This is an image war. Offset's image, the passionate man fighting for his family. Cardi's image, the woman standing firm in her boundaries. Both narratives are powerful, but only one of them requires reaction. Offset needs a response to validate his gesture. Cardi doesn't need anything. And that imbalance shifts power. Now imagine the psychological side of this. When someone makes a grand gesture and receives nothing back, they start questioning everything. Was it too late? Was it not enough? Was she already gone emotionally? And that kind of uncertainty can create frustration. Not loud frustration, but quiet frustration. The kind that builds. Now here's where fans are divided. Some believe Cardi is playing it smart, protecting her peace and brand. Others believe she's leaving the door slightly open by not publicly shutting it down aggressively. But here's the truth. Silence doesn't equal hope. Sometimes silence equals closure without drama. And closure without drama is mature. But maturity isn't flashy. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. Grand gestures trend. Arguments trend. Explosive reactions trend. Calm detachment. That just quietly wins. Now let's talk about something deeper. Offset's move wasn't small. 10,000 balloons is not subtle. It's cinematic. Cinematic gestures are designed to create emotional momentum. They're big, they're visual, they're shareable. But what happens when the movie scene doesn't get a sequel? It becomes a standalone moment, and standalone moments fade quickly online. That might be the part nobody prepared for. Because without Cardi responding, the balloon story has a short lifespan. The internet moves fast, and without ongoing drama, it shifts focus. which means the only lasting image becomes this: Cardi standing firm, Offset trying. That's the frame. Now, here's the real tension building. If Offset accepts the silence and steps back, he preserves dignity. If he escalates, bigger gestures, emotional posts, subtle shots, he risks looking desperate. And desperation shifts sympathy. Right now, sympathy leans heavily toward Cardi. She looks composed, focused, unbothered. And unbothered is powerful. But here's the unpredictable part. Public silence doesn't always reflect private communication. We don't know what conversations have happened off camera. We don't know if there were final talks. We don't know if there was closure privately. All we see is what's visible. And what's visible tells a clear story. She's not engaging. Now imagine being Offset, watching her continue to thrive publicly. Touring, posting, moving forward. Every smile becomes confirmation that she's not broken. And sometimes the hardest thing to accept isn't rejection. It's seeing someone fine without you. That hits differently. Now let's talk legacy. Both of them are bigger than this relationship. But moments like this shape narratives long term. Cardi's narrative right now? Self-respect, boundaries, independence. Offset's narrative? Romantic effort, emotional reaction, public pursuit. And neither is inherently villainous. But one looks stable, the other looks unsettled. And in public relationships, stability wins perception battles. Now here's the question nobody's asking loud enough. Was the balloon gesture about reconciliation or about control of the story? Because if the goal was to win her back quietly, it wouldn't have been so public. Public gestures create public pressure, and public pressure can sometimes make someone feel cornered. But Cardi didn't move, which means if pressure was part of the strategy, it didn't work. And that realization can sting. Now we're at a crossroads moment. The story can go three ways. Silence continues, and the relationship quietly closes. Offset escalates, and things get messy. A surprise reconciliation drops, and the internet explodes. Right now, it feels like option one. But celebrity relationships rarely stay predictable, and that unpredictability is what keeps the audience locked in. Because something feels unfinished, not explosive, just unfinished. And unfinished stories are dangerous. They leave room for twists. Here's the part nobody expected. Offset didn't respond again. No emotional live, no cryptic Instagram rant, no "you'll regret this" energy. Just silence. And that silence, it hit harder than the balloons. Because when someone makes a massive public gesture and then suddenly goes quiet, it usually means one of two things. Either they were told very clearly to stop, or they realize the door is actually closed. Now let's look at Cardi. She didn't mock the gesture, she didn't shade it, she didn't even subtly address it. Instead, she kept moving. Tour dates, studio clips, family time, brand partnerships. No heartbreak narrative, no sad girl era, no "he broke me" posts. And that shift right there changed the entire power dynamic. Because when a breakup happens publicly, the audience expects emotion. They expect drama. They expect tears. They expect revenge bars in songs. But what they got instead was composure. And composure is dangerous in situations like this. Why? Because composure suggests clarity. Clarity suggests finality, and finality is what Offset may not have been prepared for. Now let's talk about perception versus reality. Online, fans are split into three camps. Camp 1, he's fighting for love, that's romantic. Camp 2, she's done, respect it. Camp 3, this is all PR. But here's what's interesting. The longer Cardi stays silent, the weaker the PR stunt theory becomes. Because PR stunts require back-and-forth energy. They require reactions. They require escalation. What we're seeing instead is a quiet exit, and quiet exits rarely benefit both sides. If this was strategy, it's benefiting her more than him. Now imagine being Offset watching the narrative settle. Instead of, Cardi is heartbroken, the conversation became, she knows her worth. That's not a good pivot if you were trying to win sympathy, and this is where things get psychological. When someone tries to fix something loudly and gets no response, they start questioning themselves. Was I not enough? Was it too late? Was she already gone emotionally before I even tried? That internal spiral can either lead to growth or resentment. So far, we haven't seen resentment publicly, but the internet doesn't forget patterns. And some fans are watching closely for the next move. Now here's another layer. Grand gestures feel big in the moment, but real repair happens in private. And if private repair isn't happening, the balloons were just a headline. Cardi not reacting publicly may be the clearest message she could send. Because in celebrity culture, attention equals validation. And she gave none, not even a like. Now let's address something deeper. What if the 10,000 balloons weren't meant to change her mind? What if they were meant to show the world he tried? That changes the motivation completely, because there's a difference between, I want her back, and I want people to know I wanted her back. Subtle difference, huge psychological impact. If the gesture was about public redemption, not reconciliation, then the silence hurts even more. Because redemption requires audience engagement, and Cardi gave the audience nothing to amplify. So the story quietly faded, and fading stories are uncomfortable when you expected fireworks. Now let's talk about respect. Whether people believe Offset was sincere or not, one thing is clear. Cardi's boundaries were not moved by spectacle, and that sends a message far beyond this relationship. It tells every woman watching, you don't have to respond just because it's dramatic. And it tells every man watching, grand gestures don't override broken trust. That's the bigger conversation forming beneath the headlines. Now here's the part that's interesting. There have been no public legal threats, no explosive interviews, no messy leaks, which means this hasn't turned ugly. It's turned quiet, and quiet can be more powerful than chaos. Because chaos keeps you emotionally attached. Quiet forces acceptance, and acceptance is what ends stories. Now the big question, is this actually over? Or are they just in the calm before another storm? Celebrity relationships have a history of dramatic reversals. One surprise dinner, one family moment, one public photo, and the entire narrative flips. But right now, there's no sign of that. Just distance, and distance, when maintained consistently, becomes closure. Offset's rage era, it seems to have cooled. Cardi's unbothered era, it seems steady. And when one person stabilizes emotionally faster than the other, that tells you who processed the breakup first. So what happens next? Does he fully step back? Does she officially address it? Or does this become one of those silent breakups that we only fully understand years later? The balloons were loud, but the silence that followed, that's the part changing everything. So now I'm going to leave this with you. Was this love? Or was this control disguised as romance? 10,000 balloons sounds dramatic. It looks cinematic. It photographs beautifully. But when someone says, I don't want anything from you, and doesn't bend, that's not coldness. That's clarity. And clarity is rare in public breakups. Offset made a move that was loud. Cardi made a move that was silent. Which one do you think had more power? Do you believe he was genuinely trying to fix what he broke? Or do you think this was about saving face after the narrative turned against him? Because here's the truth. Grand gestures only work when the foundation is still intact. If the trust is gone, if the respect is fractured, if the emotional safety is broken, no amount of balloons, flowers, or spectacle can rebuild that. And that's the real conversation this situation opened up. Not just about celebrities, but about boundaries, about ego, about public humiliation, about what happens when someone finally decides they've had enough. Now I want to hear from you. If someone sent you 10,000 balloons after hurting you, would you melt? Or would you walk away the same way Cardi allegedly did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you want more deep dives into the psychology behind celebrity drama, public breakups, and the moves people make when their ego gets bruised, make sure you subscribe. Turn on notifications, because the next story, it might flip the narrative all over again. Until then, watch carefully, because in situations like this, the loudest moment is never the one that decides the ending. It's the quiet one that follows.